My Lords, I rise because, as the noble lady Baroness Pidgeon said, my noble friend Baroness Jones of Moulscombe signed a number of amendments in this group. So noble Lords will note I don't normally speak on transport, but I'm speaking on the noble lady's behalf this afternoon. And I begin with Lord Lucas made a very interesting comment. An efficient use of the charger would mean it's being used by more than one person. I would go rather further than that and say what we want is efficient use of cars being used by more than one person, which would then mean the practical reality is, of course, most cars spend the vast amount of their time stationary, occupying public space when they're parked on the road. And if we can come to an arrangement, I think this is where Amendment 66, put down by the noble lady Baroness Pidgeon, local planning authorities to publish and regularly update a 3-year vehicle charging infrastructure plan. That charging infrastructure plan, I think ideally, would be something that looks very much at that car club kind of model, which could potentially free up large amounts of space in our cities to be put to much better use than simply being occupied by a stationary vehicle for, I think the last figure I saw was 96% of the time, because that's when the amount of time cars are stationary. I do also have to say, it will be noted that my noble friend did not assign any of the cross-pavement charging solutions. And I know that Caroline Russell, the Green London Assembly member, would not forgive me if I didn't make the point that whatever we're talking about charging across the pavement, the first priority has to be for pedestrians, and particularly for vulnerable pedestrians, and to make sure that anything that's installed or allowed does not create, on what's already a very difficult streetscape in many occasions, doesn't make even greater difficulties for pedestrians, particularly vulnerable pedestrians, obviously wheelchairs, buggies, etc., etc. And I will note in that, perhaps declaring an interest, that I used to regularly, when I was in Camden, try not to trip over the electric cable that my actual boss of the time trailed out of his house and across the pavement out to his car on the street. And because he was my boss, I wasn't quite allowed to do anything about it. But I want to focus mostly on Amendments 64 and 67, which are about heavy goods vehicles. And I think this is a really crucial issue, both in terms of environment and public health. At the moment, fewer than 1% of the new HGVs being sold are electric. There's 500,000 HGVs in the British fleet. At the moment, they're emitting the equivalent of 20 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year, the same as 2 million homes. They're also particularly bad in terms of emissions of nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, which have very significant impacts on public health, and that tends to particularly strike in poorer, more disadvantaged areas. You think about the homes along busy main roads, which tend to be where people who already have poorer health already live. There's also the point that they're much quieter, which has significant public health impacts, and they're also better to drive. And one of the things we have in terms of HGVs is a very much ageing driving population, and something that's easier to drive is a significant issue there. I'd also note that the government is currently has a plug-in truck grant with a discount for those who purchase them of up to £25,000. So there's the push there, and the government's spending money on it, but what's lacking at the moment is the general charging infrastructure, and that's what these two amendments seek to have a program and to make sure that when new depots and other infrastructure is being built, that they're covered. And I will note that at the moment there's still an issue about the speed of charging, but megawatt charging is on the way. And when we come to later amendments that my noble friend also signed, we've also got to think about the infrastructure of distribution of electricity to make sure it's able to cater to that very heavy demand. But I think there's very strong arguments here for a concerted, planned, organised approach. What we have now is extremely ad hoc, and in far too many cases we are seeing literally people trailing a cord across the pavement, which is a really bad idea for all kinds of reasons.